New reporting tonight in the Mar-a-Lago document story that does get into that area where people joke that MAGA stands for making attorneys get attorneys, or at least making them uneasy working for the former president. The Washington Post headline reads, Trump lawyer refused Trump request in February to say all documents returned. After initial return of 15 boxes, attorney Alex Cannon thought there might be more records at Mar-a-Lago. People familiar with the matter said. Our Sarah Murray joins us with more on this. Sarah, what else is in this Washington Post reporting, and what does it reveal about what purportedly happened between the former president and his lawyer?
Well, John, I think what this tells you, it's the former president going to one of his attorneys, Alex Cannon, earlier in 2022, and essentially saying, will you tell the archives that everything they've asked for, we've returned it? And you see in this Washington Post report that the attorney's just not comfortable making that statement. And of course, we would later learn why. If he had made that statement and then it came out after, the May subpoena, after the August search, that there were all of these classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, that puts these lawyers in legal jeopardy. And it's clear that this attorney had enough misgivings that he didn't want to make that declaration, John.
So the Post also has some reporting about who packed the boxes that were initially returned to the National Archives. What do they say about that?
That's right. These are boxes that were returned to the archives in January. And according to the Washington Post, Donald Trump was the one who packed up these boxes. Now, certainly this would be interesting if that is in fact true, if the former president is handpicking, the things that go in these boxes. We do have to say that, CNN has not confirmed this reporting that the former president was the one who was actually going through it. But it certainly is an interesting anecdote if it proves true, John.
Sarah Murray, thank you so much. Joining us for his perspective is CNN contributor and former Nixon White House counsel John Dean. So, John, how could this impact the Justice Department investigation into the former president and potentially the criminal case against him?
I was listening to Sarah as she was reporting and thinking about Watergate days and how these kinds of stories keep coming out, but they're generally, there's a long lag time. In other words, the key events have already happened. Alex Cannon may have already been in front of a grand jury. The buzz and the concern about his testimony or lack thereof, or how the attorneys were going to deal with it, has already probably rippled through the Trump team. So it's just something we in the public are learning, and it looks more and more from that information like the department is working on a very strong obstruction of justice case. This would fit right in that pattern.
Why?
Why? Because the president is, at this point, the Department of Justice is actually in the investigation. The president is telling someone to not honor or be truthful about what you're turning over. He's dictated a statement that a lawyer is not going to put his name on. They'll later get somebody who will do a modified version of that, but it's part of a pattern of obstructing the investigation.
So according to the report, again, you're referring to Alex Cannon here, the former president asked this attorney, Alex Cannon, to make the statement to the National Archives about the document. Because it's an attorney here, are there ways that the Justice Department can investigate it without hitting attorney-client privilege roadblocks?
There certainly are. If this fits into what's called the crime fraud exception, there is no attorney-client privilege. And if you have an attorney who is unwilling to do something, while he may not have told the department directly himself, others might have reported it for him, and then he got asked the question, he'd have to do it or claim the privilege. It doesn't sound like a privilege has been raised here, although he would theoretically be able to fight for that for a while, both he and Trump. It sounds like they're over that hurdle, and this information is out and part of the investigation.
What would the possible criminality be in asking your attorney to give false information to a government agency?
Just that, asking your attorney to give false information. That's obstruction of justice. That is suborning perjury. That is suborning false statements. It is a nasty crime, and one that the government is very active in pursuing in these types of investigations.
And the fact that the Washington Post reports that Trump packed the box or boxes himself, how does that impact the case? Does it give him knowledge or greater knowledge of what was in the boxes then?
That certainly made me sit up when I was reading the story, I must say. That kind of detail, that he would be involved in actually packing the boxes and deciding out of the thousands of pages of documents that are there what to put in the box and what to keep himself, making decisions of that. It might be somehow explanatory. Maggie Haberman will be much more attuned to this than I am, and what we might learn from the pattern of what he did give and what he kept. So I don't know if we'll ever know all that, because a lot of it will be classified, but the non-classified might show a pattern of what he wanted to keep and why he wanted to keep it.
John Dean, thank you very much.
I want to discuss now. CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig is here. Elie, good evening. Yet another twist and turn in the documents saga. Alex Cannon, Trump's attorney, pressed to say all the material was returned to the National Archives, but then refused. Turns out there were still thousands more documents at Mar-a-Lago. If Trump knew that, then what does that mean?
Yeah, Don, this is crucial evidence of Donald Trump's knowledge and intent, and these are key things that prosecutors look for. Let's play this out. So Donald Trump says to his lawyer, hey, I want you to tell the archives that we've now returned everything to them. This is after they returned that initial batch of 15 or so boxes. That is false. We know that's false. We know there were not just a few documents scattered around Mar-a-Lago, but thousands of documents left. And then Trump's lawyer responds by saying, I can't or I won't do that. Now, the only reason a lawyer would say that is because the lawyer knows or suspects it's not true. Lawyers cannot lie to investigators, to court. So at that point, Donald Trump certainly knows that his lawyer believes this is a false statement. So to me, this really is important evidence that prosecutors ought to be taking a close look at.
We had a similar conversation, I believe it was last week, when we were talking about this lawyer who was sidelined for Donald Trump. And I said, well, maybe they did not have a real or rational argument to come up with. And you said, well, they can always come up with something. Is that what we're seeing playing out here once again, a similar thing?
It's more of the same, Don. This is a waving red flag anytime Donald Trump says something publicly or wants to argue something in court and his lawyers say, no can do. The reason is, yes, as we discussed, lawyers have very broad latitude in the kind of things they're allowed to argue. You have a duty as a lawyer to argue vigorously for your client. However, you cannot lie to a court under court ethics rules, and you sure as heck cannot lie to investigators, whether they're from the archives or the FBI, because that is a federal crime to make a false statement to a federal investigators, potentially obstruction of justice as well. So anytime we see this pattern done, and you're right, it's been a recurring pattern, Trump says something publicly, lawyers refuse to say it in court, then you should have your antenna up there.
All right, Elie, this is fascinating because the Washington Post is reporting, it says that Trump himself packed the boxes that were returned in January. What are the implications of that?
So that's actually really important, because one of the big questions is, how do these boxes get from the White House down to Mar-a-Lago? And then who sort of put them together for the piecemeal return that was made to the archives and then DOJ? And what this tells us is that Donald Trump, hey, he's a hands-on guy, I guess. He physically put together those 15 boxes, according to this reporting, of documents. And so somebody, and if you follow this reporting, it would be Donald Trump, said, okay, these 15 boxes we're going to give back to the archives. But inherent in that is, but not the rest of these documents, not the other documents that are going to remain at Mar-a-Lago until DOJ gets involved. So again, that shows me some intentionality here by Donald Trump, some conscious decision-making. Give them these documents, but not those.
The Post is also pointing out here that if Trump continued to pressure, if Trump continued to pressure aides to make false statements, even after learning the Justice Department was involved in retrieving documents, that could be seen as obstruction of justice. Do you agree with that? If Trump continued to pressure aides, that could be seen as obstruction of justice. Can you speak to that?
I do agree with that. If that reporting proves out, it is a crime to make a false statement yourself to investigators. It also is a crime, just the same, to pressure others to make a false statement. That would be sort of an accessory to the false statements. And also, if Donald Trump was aware that there was a federal investigation going on, or that a federal investigation was fairly likely, then it also could be obstruction of justice. And keep in mind, Don, these are very closely related, or in some instances, the exact crimes that DOJ cited when they went to a judge to get that search warrant in August. So it seems like DOJ is thinking along these lines as well.
Elie Honig, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.